Alright, today's video is going to be constructed a bit differently. Normally the premise is a singular topic, but truth be told in the games industry there is a lot happening right now, and as a result I want to compress 3 of the larger current events into a broader discussion on how the gaming industry at large is effectively under siege. Now, when I say a lot is going on, I don't mean new releases or big announcements internally within the industry itself, though that is also going to be happening quite soon since we are, as of the making of this video at least, about a week away from E3 2019. What I want to focus on are outside sources which are poised to impact the games industry in a way that could quite easily become extremely substantial. The first factor is trade tariffs. A few other creators have discussed this topic already, but not too long ago the Trump administration, as a result of its continuing trade war with China, proposed a long series of tariffs that would cover a massive spread of imports. The official documentation is lengthy, to say the very least, but way at the bottom there are a number of lines that are particularly important. There is radio remote control apparatus for video game consoles, there's electrical machines with translation/dictionary, flat panel displays except for heading 8528, except 8528.51/61, infrared video game controller, and then there is video game consoles and machines other than those of heading 9504.30, and lastly, game machines other than coin or token operated, and parts and accessories thereof. There are some more lines that pertain to the subject, but I won't bore everyone here too much. Essentially what it boils down to is video game consoles and their associated accessories will be subjected to a 25% import tariff if they are incoming from China, and China is currently, and most likely will remain for the foreseeable future, the world leader in manufacturing when it comes to video game consoles. A really quick breakdown from my rudimentary research is that Sony utilizes a company called Foxconn to manufacture their PS4s. Foxconn is a Taiwanese company, but has 12 major factories in 9 Chinese cities, which means that the tariffs would affect the entirety of PS4 imports. And Microsoft utilizes 2 companies, one being Flex, an American multinational technology manufacturer, headquartered in Singapore, and the other, more important partner, also Foxconn. So just like PlayStation 4 consoles, Xbox products would be affected in the exact same way. Now, this isn't the first time that tariffs have been levied against China. There is definitely some history there, but this new proposal is a significant jump over the previous 10% standard, and this is also the first time that these tariffs have been expanded to include such a wide range of products, particularly video game related ones. In the past, there were certain graphics cards that were subjected to tariff sanctions, but even then, the scope of the regulation was fairly limited. An important thing to note is that even when tariffs are officially implemented, and this current round are not as of yet officially enforced, they are sometimes circumvented. A good example of this is the honey trade, and I know this is a bit off topic, but essentially what happened is China developed a rice-based syrup with which they could cheat US quality control testing, and they used that syrup to dilute traditional honey and flood the United States market with an intentionally detrimental effect on local economics. To combat this, the United States created large tariffs on honey, specifically originating from mainland China, and there are a number of different investigations into the subject that are a matter of public record, but China simply rerouted their honey through neighboring countries to circumvent these sanctions and continue to flood the US economy with cheap, diluted product. Basically, even if tariffs are implemented, it does not guarantee that they will be effective. However, in the case of video game consoles, it seems highly likely that should the new measures come to pass, video game consoles will be subjected to the effects. The most common scenario that occurs when tariffs come into effect is that costs are passed down the line to the end user. That's all of us, the people who actually buy the stuff. It is exceedingly rare for companies to take a significant percentage cut from their existing revenue streams, and the overwhelming likelihood is that all products affected see an immediate price hike. Not only that, but video game consoles themselves are not necessarily all that profitable. The most profitable aspect to the console gaming market is the actual games. So for Microsoft and Sony, the console itself ends up almost becoming a vehicle of sorts. Customers that utilize their platform will be subscribing to their online services for a fee long after the console hardware purchase has passed. They will also be buying games through their local digital storefront and utilizing the platform in a number of additional ways that make the long-term profitability, pound for pound, much more important than the initial sale. Since the consoles themselves are not the largest intrinsic profit boost and may not even operate with a substantial margin at all, depending on manufacturing prices and hardware choices, the idea of eating a 25% tariff on that product without passing the cost down to the end user is almost a non-factor. And lastly, keeping all this in mind, both Sony and Microsoft are heading into the release of their next generation systems in the near future. I can't say for certain what will happen with the tariffs or how long they will even exist should they come to pass, but with new consoles looming on the horizon and a never before seen substantial tariff in the works that would, for the first time ever, affect video game consoles, it is certainly something to be aware of, especially when the price of the new PlayStation 5 is rumored to be at or around $500, and a 25% increase passed down the line to consumers would push that north of $600. Now let's switch gears here. A speculative tariff that might affect next-gen consoles is one thing, but how about something more in the here and now, which would have a far more incendiary effect? A loot box and microtransaction regulation bill proposed by Senator Josh Hawley has apparently gained bipartisan support very quickly, and progressed to a point where it is now worthy of serious consideration. To be totally upfront here, I did not expect this bill to go anywhere at all. Two previous Hawaii bills that targeted loot boxes specifically both died in committee, and the same could and likely will be true of this newest bill. But bipartisan support in the United States is no small thing, especially in the contemporary political landscape. At this point, I'd like to take a moment and say that I am typically not an advocate for governmental regulation in any capacity. The government has a notoriously clumsy approach to delicate topics, and having them take a sledgehammer to the video game space isn't something I'm keen to see. However, it is worth mentioning that the industry has failed self-regulation to such a detrimental extreme that this may in fact be the only way forward that might reverse the downward slide. So I remain extremely skeptical, but it could simply be that this has become the lesser of two evils and there is no other way. But still, regardless of where you stand, there are some vague definitions in this bill which are cause for concern. The part I want to focus on is the criteria by which a minor-oriented game is defined, since the bill is aimed at protecting minors and prohibiting the sale of loot boxes and pay-to-win microtransactions in minor-oriented games. The segment reads as follows: minor-oriented game. The term minor-oriented video game means an interactive digital entertainment product for which the target audience is individuals under the age of 18, as may be demonstrated by A, the subject matter of the product, B, the visual content of the product, C, the music or audio content of the product, D, the use of animated characters or activities that appeal to individuals under the age of 18, E, the age of characters or models in the product, F, the presence in the product of 1, celebrities who are under the age of 18, or 2, celebrities who appeal to individuals under the age of 18, G, the language used in the product, H, the content of materials used to advertise the product and the platforms on which such materials appear, I, the content of any advertising materials that appear in the product, J, other reliable empirical evidence relating to 1, the composition of the audience of the product, or 2, the audience of the product as intended by the publisher or distributor of the product, or K, other evidence demonstrating that the product is targeted at individuals under the age of 18. This language is too vague. The bill makes no mention of previously established age bracketing criteria laid out by the ESRB and intentionally constructs a loose framework that could easily mean different things to different people. What this bill comes down to, if left unaltered that is the subjective decision-making process of whatever person or persons are left in control of the outcome. The issues here are far too numerous to even list all of them. When trying to differentiate between games like FIFA, Warframe, or Fortnite, it may seem clear that Fortnite is a game aimed at children, while Warframe is not. But where would FIFA fall? Soccer players are celebrities that appeal to children, but are they aimed at children? There is far too much language here that creates a loose framework that can be manipulated and shifted to retroactively justify decisions. A large section of this hinges on intent, but when intent is typically left unverified by industry publishers, intent must be determined by a person or committee, and if that person or committee is beholden to these rule sets, they can basically make any decision that they want and find a way to justify it under the Children's Protection Act. Let's be crystal clear right now. Loot boxes are a plague, and pay-to-win microtransactions have no place in gaming. I think most of us can get on the same page with that. But this bill is not some sort of saint-like creation that will save the industry. Not in its current form. A lot of people perceive me to be somewhat conservative. I can't even count the number of times some liberal nutjob has called me alt-right in the comment section, simply because I tried to reasonably articulate that having shoehorned diversity and political narratives is unpleasant in a lot of games. But try this one on for size. Donald Trump has expressed on numerous occasions that he believes video game violence is a catalyst for actual violence. That is pure idiocy. There is hardly any data at all which corroborates that mindset, and the bulk of credible data we do have appears to categorically disprove it. Now imagine that someone who firmly believes that violent video games are a major threat to day-to-day life in the United States is the head of whatever committee is in charge of interpreting these definitions and governing the games industry under the framework of the new microtransaction and loot box regulation bill. There are an infinite number of ways that they could twist that document to harm the industry. Just to name one possible avenue, since nowhere in the document is it clarified that the ESRB ratings will be used to determine which games are and are not aimed at children, perhaps a game launches that is rated M for mature and incorporates cosmetic-only loot boxes. The game is designed for 21 plus gamers, 21 plus being the age at which you can legally gamble anyways, contains sex, violence, cursing, you name it, and many other signals, but it also happens to have some celebrities that are popular with youth culture. Now imagine that a decisively anti-violent video game advocate is in control of determining whether or not that game is in breach of this new code. They could use the vague language in their subjective power to classify the game as minor-oriented, thus prohibiting the sale of loot boxes within it, because children would be subjected to them. But the game's ESRB rating is mature. The demographic which the bill aims to protect can't even buy the game, but the game is in severe violation of regulation since it has been classified as minor-oriented, and as a result of that classification it would be penalized, even fully dismantled. The bill is too vague, and gamers are somehow rejoicing over this regulation as if it is a monumental victory. It may be inevitable, and it may be the only solution. I can accept that, I can get behind it, but in its current form, it is not good enough. And if left unchanged, as is true with most governmental regulation, it can be weaponized by whatever agenda happens to control it at the time. Now switching gears again to our last topic. Gaming is under siege from every single angle, and to complete our trifecta here, we have WHO, also known as the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization has officially determined that playing video games under a certain set of criteria constitutes an official addiction and is now classified as a disease. To be clear here, the official diagnosis does not appear in the DSM-V, which is the current standard in the United States. It is simply listed as a condition for further study, but in many other countries around the globe, gaming has now been recognized as an addictive practice that warrants the classification of disease if it interferes with day-to-day activities. Now, I would never be so naive as to dispute the idea that some gamers can be truly addicted, but that is a non-factor in the discussion since a human being can quite literally become addicted to almost anything. A person can become addicted to a specific type of food, or to a specific activity, but something like watching the sunset is not classified as a disease or addiction by the World Health Organization, despite the fact it can legitimately be psychologically addictive to certain personalities through a pattern of behavior. The ramifications to this are not overly clear as of yet, but one thing is obvious. If the mainstream perception of gaming were to shift from common entertainment hobby to detrimental disease, it would have far-reaching effects on the industry as well as those who participate within it. Ignoring some of the more interesting side effects, like can my video games be paid for by health insurance if it's a disease? Do I get paid time off from work to play new video game releases without getting fired because I'm addicted so they can't fire me? Who knows? But moving past those sort of meme-worthy ideas, classifying an activity that millions upon millions of people participate in on a daily basis and for many hours a week as a possible addiction and disease is no small thing. Now, there are a set of criteria that they have laid out which tries to break down the classification process, but yet again, it is extremely vague. The framework ignores total hours played, as it should, but tries to assert that when gaming affects sleep or other day-to-day tasks, that is when the line starts to become blurry. It is also stated that this sort of prioritization must persist for an extended period of time, in the range of 1 year, I think it said, but even if they successfully settle on a definitive list of attributes that would reasonably classify a gamer as an addict, it still makes no sense, and would constitute, at least in some households, a damaging occurrence. Since the World Health Organization does not outline a Dorito addiction or avocado addiction or jumping in puddles addiction, it seems strange to zero in on the video game industry. When tens, even hundreds of millions of players worldwide participate in an activity constantly, there will inevitably be examples to prove a narrative of addiction. But if video games were even remotely close to actual substance addiction, like nicotine, alcohol, or various other drugs, there would be a worldwide epidemic of cataclysmic proportions. The one argument of merit is that video games can be addictive because they are designed deliberately to be exactly that. Gambling addiction is very real, in part because of the dopamine rush that winning produces, and games now often contain certain gambling-esque systems, such as loot boxes. But if that argument is used, the response is to clarify that gaming is not an addiction or a disease, but one of the contained systems might be, among many systems overall. That's the culprit. You aren't addicted to the strip mall, you are addicted to the alcohol from the store at the end of the strip mall. See the difference? You're not addicted to the restaurant, you're addicted to the wine that comes with the meal in the restaurant. Gaming has enough problems. There is a spiral of deceptive advertising, problematic trends in game development such as developer crunch time, emphasis on live service garbage, and a whole host of other topics that are still evolving to this day. The last thing the industry needs are tariffs, poorly designed governmental regulation, even if regulation is necessary, it has to at least be passably calculated, and finally, the World Health Organization pushing through with stigma-laden classifications right in the middle of all of it. To summarize, the games industry is under siege. A lot is happening on a deeper level beyond whatever hot new game is about to come out, and it feels like a much more turmoil-driven time than the past years, at least the ones where I have been in tune with the goings-on. It remains to be seen what comes of all of it, but it's interesting to say the very least. I'll wrap it up there. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. We have merchandise, various subscriptions, and some other stuff too, typical YouTuber things, but that really is enough. I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.